Meanwhile, the affordability crisis forcing Americans to the margins. A survey showing that a quarter of Americans are actually using the buy now, pay later services for groceries. So it is no surprise that nearly 1 in 4 adults say that they have unmanageable debt and are being forced to choose between either paying their bills or buying their necessities every month. But Scott Besson says help is on the way.
Since January 20th, interest rates, mortgage rates are down, gasoline and energy prices are down. We're expecting the further decreases. The big tax on consumers that goes unnoticed is deregulation or regulation, and we are deregulating and bringing that down.
So look, Larry, therein lies the rub where you have WTI down to $60 a barrel, but you haven't yet seen it in like the relief at the pump. And we talk about
nationwide
deflationary forces and PPI and CPI, but we're not quite yet seeing it in the actual grocery store in terms of what people are saying.
Yeah, I agree.
What do we need to do to get to that point?
Deep prayer and meditation is probably the best thing you can do. I mean, just have some patience.
Okay.
Look, wholesale crude is now in the low 60s. So what, WTI, West Texas, 60 and change, Brent crude.
64.
Right, so those are real good numbers. I mean, those were in the 70s, and before that the 80s, and before that 100. So that will filter down into retail gasoline. There's no question about that. My guess is you have all these spring, summer transitions, boutique, climate change, what these gasoline blends have to, ethanol, all kinds of stuff kick in the spring and the summer. So hopefully you'll get down. I mean, I think there's a good shot you'll have a two-handle nationwide on gasoline prices sometime this fall.
I agree.
Which is where, Trump left it 4 or 5 years ago. So that's good. As far as the inflation rates are concerned, CPI fell in March, which was interesting. It's been slow the last 3 months. If you buy into the Cleveland Fed stuff, which is fascinating, the PCE deflator is going to be very weak, if anything. It may fall or be flat. To me, the Fed, I don't need a 4.5% Fed funds rate if I have a 2.5% CPI and falling. Okay? That's a real rate of 200 basis points. Not the highest in the world. Taylor and I talked about this yesterday on our show. It's not the highest in the world. It's not like Volcker in the 1980s. Yeah. But I think it's excessive. And I think the Fed funds futures market is pricing in boom, 25 in June and a couple 25s more than that. I'd love to see it in May, probably won't. But I think the Fed is too tight right now. That's my own take. I don't think inflation is roaring right now at all.
Jackie, the oil prices and Dagan, the Treasury yields for both of you. The good news is they're falling. The bad news is the why, because the slower growth. We keep hearing the negative Q1 prints that we could get, and if you get a second quarter negative, then technically it's a recession if the gods in D.C. decide to portray it that way. So curious how you guys are thinking about this.
I'll take the oil piece of it, and I'll say part of it might be because of dampened expectations of growth, but only slightly right now. We've talked about OPEC raising its output to increase supply on the marketplace and the anticipation that supply will increase here. I agree with Larry. Going into the summer driving season, you've got the blends, you're going to have more demand, so prices may not see the drop that we'll see by the fall, but that's when you should look for it. As many of our viewers know, I drive my legs to go round. That doesn't mean that I'm not, that oblivious to gas prices. I look at them closely. But the thing that's hitting me the hardest is food prices. And this was the biggest problem that I had, and I said it for 4 years during Biden's inflation crisis. Basically, I'll call it. Once the prices go up, you're very hard pressed to get them back. And I'm not talking about eggs, for example. That was an isolated situation, and now that price has dropped 50%. Oil, gas are commodities, and they will move around and fluctuate greatly. But the food prices have just not come down, because even with gas as one input, wages went up under all of this with the inflation. Everyone had to get paid more. And this is not price gouging by the grocers. It's just the way things are. Yeah. And why I was so angry about it at the time that it was happening, because I knew it wasn't going to come back. And food prices are my #1 input cost at home. Yeah. Food and shelter. Those are the two things I care about. So I yield my time to Dagan on the rates.
I was going to just say, when was the last time they lowered your salary or your rent when inflation went down, right, Dagan? That's the stickiness of this.
Right. They never do. In the first 2 full months of President Trump's second term, annualized the inflation is 1%. It's just astonishing. The 10-year yield, the high before he was inaugurated, was 4.8%.
It's actually down a piece.
Right, it's down quite dramatically. And I think the most important thing is that the markets are functioning well. I love the fact that President Trump called the markets, the markets were yippy.
Yeah.
And having worked on a golf course at one point in my life, I know what that means. When I'm having a really bad day, I go and watch old footage of Charles Barkley on the driving a golf ball, because he had horrible yips. He had a hitch in his swing. Anyway, I digress. So it's just to have the markets functioning properly and not having them get locked up.
A wonderful point, Dave. It's a really good point, and it kind of goes to what I said at the top of this hour. There's too much complaining going on about tariffs. Okay, let's get. The launch of tariffs was surprising. It was a lot more aggressive and shock and awe. But now they're getting down to the deal making that everyone expected. And the markets functioned well. That's so important. And people are
Treasury markets.
The demise of the Treasury markets is utter nonsense.
And equity markets working. We're going to come back for your thoughts in the next block.
Buy the dollar. I'm going to say that right. I'm going to get that. Buy the dollar. And if you want to kill inflation, one way to do it is produce more goods.
Cool.
Yeah.
Supply side growth.
Right. Yes,
Coming
sir.
up.
Just saying.